Senator Ziono, can we at least agree that General Syndulla's actions brought to light that there was an incident on Satos?
An incident, yes. But this report reads like a child's fairy tale. Jedi, false Jedi, star maps, star whales, distant galaxies. Honestly, are we to believe any of it?
Morgan Elsbeth was leading a coordinated effort by the Imperial Remnant.
Objection! Imperial Remnant. Such a sensational term. There is no proof of any coordination between the scattered and dwindling number of Imperial forces.
What about the conflict on Mandalore?
Exactly my point. Gideon was a warlord acting on his own. There's no proof of a greater conspiracy and thus no immediate threat to this republic.
If Thrawn returns, that will change quickly.
If.
I don't know what frightens me more. The possibility of what might happen or your unwillingness to see it.
Greetings once again, Bucketheads. Mavar Tigar. Welcome to our 218th Senator Slamming episode of Mandovision. I am your host, Nargai Tom, and thank you so much for checking the small independent Star Wars podcast. Remember, the best way to reach out to us is, of course, on social media. We are at Mando_Vision on Twitter and Instagram. You can email the show, mandovisiontom@gmail.com. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow, and share this show with all the Mandalorians in your covert. Well, how is everyone doing? It is Wednesday, the day after the latest episode of Ahsoka has dropped. Part 7 is now out. And, quite the action-packed episode of the show, I have to say. But, I have some observations. They may not be everyone's favorite observations, but again, remember, this podcast has always been about what Star Wars shows are instead of what they aren't. So it'll still have our typical, our signature view on the shows and in the episodes in particular. How's everyone feeling thus far? Again, 7 parts. We got 1 more to go in this season of Ahsoka. And I think it's fair to say that at this point, unless we're not paying that much attention, we're realizing this is this season as a whole is setting the table for something much, much bigger. And I'm excited about that because I suspect it'll be something that bleeds into The Mandalorian for Season 4. It'll bleed into if there's another season of Book of Boba Fett, which seems unlikely at this point. We haven't heard anything about that in a long time. And obviously to the big Filoni directed movie that has been announced as well to sort of culminate this New Republic era. And this show is putting those pieces into place, and this episode in particular is about moving those pieces into place to put all the elements together, right? So it's not my favorite way of telling a story in particular. Like, I wish, and I'll just say this is like sort of my commentary, my criticism of the episode in particular, which again, it's a very good episode. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the action. I enjoyed the sort of humorous feels to it. But with rare exception, the Star Wars shows tend to do this, right? Like, you get to the second to last episode of the season, and again, maybe with the exception of obviously Andor, but maybe with the exception of the first season of The Mandalorian, well, I guess season 2 probably applies as well. But that 7th episode should really be setting the stage for more than what we got from Ahsoka this week, I think. Again, this was about moving pieces around so that we have a big confrontation. But what it's not doing, and what Andor did so well, was every episode was just steadily ratcheting up the tension, the dramatic tension, for that next episode, so that when you got to the season finale of Andor, you knew it was a powder keg and it was gonna explode, and by and large, we don't get that from this episode of Ahsoka, and that's not a knock on the series. It's just something I sort of would have liked to have seen a bit more of. The stakes still are still the same. There's no sort of raising of those stakes, though. Like, it's just everything's kind of like at the same level it was before. We just have our players in place a little bit differently than they were when the episode started, right? So the conflict that will come in that finale seems a little bit more even now that our heroes are united against the common threat. But there's still a lot to talk about for things in this episode that we don't get to see, and that we have to wonder, will that pan out next week in the season finale? So that being said, there's a decent amount to discuss. There's not a lot of plot to pull apart in this one, because again, it is action-based, but there's some fun stuff to get into, and we will do that right now once we get past the particulars of the episode. So as I said, this is Ahsoka, Season 1, Part 7, Dreams and Madness. Original air date September 26, 2023. Excuse me. Episode written by Dave Filoni, directed by Geeta Patel. I hope I said her name correctly. Again, this person, wonderful job directing the action in the episodes. Really, really strong stuff there. Our primary cast this week: Rosario Dawson, Natasha Lou Bordizzo, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, Ray Stevenson, Ivana Sakno, Diana Lee Inosanto, David Tennant, Lars Mikkelsen, Genevieve O'Reilly, and special appearances by both Hayden Christensen and Anthony Daniels. I'd also be remiss to omit Iman Esfandi as Ezra Bridger. And another lovely appearance by Paul Sun-Hung Lee as Captain Teva. Always great to see him on the screen. Nelson Lee returns as Senator Ziano, who's proven to be quite the foil for Hera at this point. That's our primary cast this week. Let's get to our plot. Hera must answer to the New Republic while a reunion takes place far, far away. So they're really hitting hard on that one, aren't they? But let's go ahead. Let's get to the other side of our bump and get into the episode and just kind of talk about it, right? You guys ready? You know what that means. It is time. Strap on your buckets, and let's go.
Grand Admiral, as you anticipated, the minefield was triggered by a pod of arriving Starwells. Among them was a T6 class Jedi shuttle.
It would seem Ahsoka Tano is alive and well after all.
Here is everything the Inquisitorial database had on her.
Her master was General Anakin Skywalker.
Yes.
You're certain there's only the one starship?
Correct, Grand Admiral. Our fighters have already engaged the target and pursued them into the debris field.
Excellent. That'll be all, Captain. Withdraw the fighters and have them stand by.
Why not allow them to follow?
There's no need to waste our resources.
With due respect, Grand Admiral, without pursuit, we shall lose them in the debris field.
You're quite right, of course. Jedi are very good at hiding. They've been practicing that for years. However, we are getting to know our adversary. And if she's anything like her master, she'll be unpredictable and quite dangerous. Which is why we must control all variables. Put her on a path of her own choosing, so that no matter which direction she takes, we'll always be one step ahead of her.
So I love that exchange between Morgan and Grand Admiral Thrawn, partially because, and a big chunk of it, I'll be honest, is like the sort of little look he gives to Morgan Elsbeth as he reads that Ahsoka Tano's master was General Anakin Skywalker, which to me, this is a clear nod to the Timothy Zahn Thrawn prequel books that came out, which saw Thrawn teaming up with General Anakin Skywalker at one point when he was still with the Chiss. And later on, once he was a Grand Admiral for the Empire, teaming up with Darth Vader and then deducing through Thrawn's general cleverness that Anakin Skywalker and Darth Vader are the same person, and making Thrawn one of the few people in the galaxy to know that secret. And so I think, to me, he kind of gives this look to Morgan Elsbeth to kind of indicate to us, the audience, that he knows exactly who General Anakin Skywalker is and what he becomes. And so that changes his perception on Ahsoka, right? Like, now you can only Thrawn can only extrapolate that the Padawan of Anakin Skywalker would be equally unpredictable and dangerous as Anakin was in many senses. And I think it's a fair assumption on his part. So a lot of this episode, from Thrawn's point of view, has to do with stalling and delaying and buying time for his forces to gather up everything they need to depart for the main Star Wars galaxy once again. They're loading up the Star Destroyer with all the items from the catacombs. We'll just call them items right now because we still aren't clear. I still believe them to be the bodies of fallen Night Brothers and Night Sisters, and maybe even some fallen Stormtroopers that maybe died in battle on that planet for Thrawn and for the Night Sisters, the Great Mothers. And we'll wait and see. We'll see. I expect that to be revealed to us next week in the season finale. It's interesting to me. Now again, it's you don't want to talk about what the Star Wars shows aren't. You want to talk about what they are. But it's an interesting choice, in my opinion, that they had to wait for the arrival of Morgan Elsbeth and the Eye of Sion to make their preparations, right? Now, maybe there's something to that. Maybe you can't remove these bodies from the catacombs. Maybe there's like a shelf life that once the bodies are taken out of the catacombs, they only have X amount of time before they're no longer viable to be revived by Night Sister magic or whatever means they're going to use. Again, we're assuming it's Night Sister magic. We've seen that documented in Star Wars: The Clone Wars. If the zombie theory holds, unless it's something else that we are not aware of just yet. It is interesting to me that there must be some sort of time limit, or else why not just have the Star Destroyer loaded up, ready to go, and so that when Morgan Elsbeth gets there, you just go up, take the Star Destroyer out of the atmosphere of the planet, hook up to the hyperdrive ring, and just get out of there. Just go. But I guess that's not as dramatic as if there's there's a sort of like a ticking clock, and it gives our heroes a chance to reunite and reacclimate and kind of get more involved in the conflict. So that's a choice they've made. And again, there may be a perfectly logical reason why they couldn't make these preparations ahead of time. It's just something that I was thinking about recently. Is like Thrawn's much more of a planner than this. There must be a reason why he couldn't just have the ship loaded up and ready to go. But again, I also wonder, he's had somewhere between 5 and 8 years or so to hunt down Ezra Bridger and kill him, and he hasn't done that yet. So again, there's a lot that we don't know about the time that they've been gone, and I'm not sure they're going to be keen on really filling in a lot of the blanks right now. That's definitely something that we're not getting. We still don't know what Ahsoka was doing during the events of Star Wars 4, 5, and 6. So, it's one of those mysteries. And will we get an answer at some point? Maybe, maybe not. To be determined. Let's go back to the beginning of the episode, though, with our cold open here. And we're checking in with Hera, having a meeting with all the senators that told her not to do what she ended up doing, which was going out to Cephas and investigating the claims of the star map and all these different things. Sniffing out the Imperial remnant after the incident on Corellia. And now she's getting chastised. And as Senator Ziono, in particular, is interested in court-martialing her, busing her down into nothing. And Hera has that great line, the line that we've talked about in this podcast. And I would imagine many other Star Wars podcasts have talked about too. It's like, when there is a threat, this New Republic, will not be ready for it because they are being willfully ignorant to the threats that still exist. They are dismissing the Imperial remnant. They are dismissing the rumors of Thrawn. All these different factors come into play. And so to have Hera finally vocalize that for us as an audience filled me with some happiness. It's like, oh, good. People are seeing it. People, our heroes are just as frustrated by this bureaucracy as we are. And so it was really, really nice to have that vocalized. And then, of course, the moment that I was like not prepared for, and it sort of comes out of the blue. It's a very Deus Ex Machina kind of moment. C-3PO of all characters arrives on hand to present a data disk that contains information from Senator Leia Organa, kind of clearing Hera, right? Like, oh no, Hera was acting on my behest. And I didn't know, you guys didn't tell her that she couldn't go because I had already told her she could go. And so, it gets Hera out of the jam she's in. And again, it's very plot convenient, but it's also a nice reminder that our original heroes still have a role at this point in the New Republic, right? Leia in particular. We don't know what Luke's up to other than building his temples. We don't know what Han and Chewie are up to. Are they off on their own yet? Is Baby Ben a thing? Or is Han trying to be the dad? We don't know any of that stuff just yet, and I don't know if we'll ever get to that point. I think I may have speculated that if the Ahsoka show and what they're kind of building to with Thrawn is any sort of reimagining of the original Thrawn books, Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising, and The Last Command, I would be a scotch disappointed if Han, Luke, and Leia weren't able to be a part of that battle in some capacity in the struggle against Thrawn. I know that obviously we're limited because we'd have to CGI all of them, right? Like we'd have to de-age them and CGI it and do all these different things that could rub people the wrong way. And so we, again, it's a reimagining, and it looks like it'll just end up being our cast from Rebels, which is great. That's fine too. But it does sort of lead in something I mentioned before, and sort of like the diminishing of our great heroes from the original trilogy. But that's for a different episode of the podcast, and I'd like to have that conversation with a friend of the show. So we'll talk about that at another time with a friend. In the meantime, though, again, a nice moment. I enjoyed Captain Teva stepping up and mentioning the Battle of Mandalore, and what Moff Gideon does there. Now, again, Senator Ziono turns that to his advantage. That's an isolated incident. It's a one-time thing, blah, blah, blah. That just underlines what I'm trying to say. But linking it to Mandalore and then kind of giving us a frame of reference for like where we are in the timeline, that's always nice to know that we are after Season 3 of The Mandalorian. Because, again, you would imagine the events from this show will trickle into Season 4 of The Mandalorian as well, as we cover this whole New Republic era. And again, the scope of The Mandalorian seems to be changing as Din Djarin is not the titular Mandalorian anymore. There's Bo-Katan, and who knows if that changes and expands to more Mandalorians, getting a little bit more face time moving forward. It's going to be interesting to see as this whole New Republic era kind of culminates, right? Yeah, and I think that's all I really have to say about that opening sequence. It was a nice way to see Hera get out of trouble, and now she's freed up for the coming fray, right? Won't be busted on the court-martial and all that stuff, right? It worked out pretty darn well. So now we have to go back to Peridea and check in with our heroes. Again, this is an action-packed episode. After that cold open, it's basically action nonstop for the majority of this episode. We cut to Ahsoka and Huyang in the Star Whale, traversing hyperspace to get to Peridea, and we see Ahsoka, going through her lightsaber forms with holo recordings from Anakin Skywalker. So another appearance by Hayden Christensen as Anakin, and I don't think that Ahsoka's necessarily listening to these as a reminder of anything like that, but just sort of as like a calming technique, but also a way to sort of remind herself that it's okay to embrace the teachings of Anakin Skywalker, because that's her foundation, is all of that to begin with. and so sort of re-embracing that after her encounter with him in the World Between Worlds. So we know that our Star Whales are coming out of hyperspace, and as indicated last week, and by the clip we played a moment ago, Thrawn was prepared. He had mined with a lot of mines. Holy Toledo! He mined the exit around hyperspace where the Star Whales would emerge, and begin triggering the mines. And I was slightly horrified by the scene, because I kept thinking, oh my gosh, are they just gonna start blowing up Star Whales on the screen? Like, what's about to happen here? So when Ahsoka and Huang exit their Star Whale to see what exactly is happening, I was rather relieved when the Star Whales just hyperspace out of there, knowing that they were in danger, and then leaving Ahsoka and Huang to fend for themselves. Again, kind of rude in that sense, but I like that the Star Whales were not just going to keep on their path and blow themselves up. That really would have bummed me out quite a bit. I don't know if I could have handled seeing a Star Whale explode in a Star Wars show. That would have been maybe that would have been a step too far for me to handle. I don't know what it was. It was like, oh God, don't blow them up, please. But it leads us into some great space battle. We get some combat around the debris field around the planet, the skeletal remains of many a Star Whale. All the tenets of Star Wars are in this episode. You have space combat, you have land combat, you have lightsaber combat. I mean, all the things happen in this episode. And so Ahsoka's going to lay low and try to figure out where exactly on the planet's surface Sabine is. And now we cut to the surface, right? So Sabine and Ezra are moving with the Noti, the little turtle-like frog guys who befriended Sabine and Ezra is living with. As they're on the move, they're sort of nomads, right? Like they kind of a peaceful, non-violent culture, and so they're nomadic by nature. When danger's afoot, they get the heck out of there, and so they're driving their little. I don't even know what they are, like armored turtle shells across the landscape. Sabine sort of fills in Ezra on like some very broad stroke things that he's missed, with the Galactic Civil War in particular. I feel like she skirts around a few things, but maybe Sabine doesn't know all the details. It's sort of interesting to contemplate that aspect of things. But you would imagine she knows more than many just because of her connection to Ahsoka. But, she gives Ezra sort of the broad strokes on things. And then, hey, it's time for more conflict. And that comes in the form of Baylan Skoll, Shin Hati, and the bandits, the marauders that they sort of encountered at the tail end of last week's episode that they were using to hunt down the Noti, Ezra, and Sabine. And so this goes into our next wave of conflict. But what's interesting about it is what Baylan says to Shin and how he sort of cuts her loose. Talking about her ambitions and how she needs to do this and then go back to be part of the new empire. So again, Shin and Baylan are these completely fascinating characters that we have not spent nearly enough time with in this season. I still don't know their motivations. We clearly don't know their backstories. I really would like to see how these characters came to be, how they came to be together. And when he talks about Shin's ambitions, I need more. I need to know more about this. We talked about last week's conversation between the two, that Baylan seems to be searching for a power on Peridia that will help break the cycle of light and dark, rising and falling constantly. That continual cycle of that is the Star Wars conflict, right? And he's looking to break that. But apparently Shin, and she sort of expressed as much, doesn't really see it the way that he does. And so Baylan cutting her loose is an interesting tactic. And it also says, again, it says to me that we just don't know enough about these characters, and that really, really bums me out because I don't know what will happen next week to Baylan Skoll. But by and large, unless they recast, then this might be the last time we see Baylan Skoll. And that just really bums me out. I am clearly referring to the passing of Ray Stevens. So unless they just do a legit recast, which is something that Star Wars has been averse to for reasons I'm not 100% in alignment with, this what happens next week to Baylan Skoll could possibly be his final fate. So I don't know if we'll get more clarity on his final fate or if it's going to be sort of left ambiguous. and never to be picked up again because of the passing of Ray Stevens. But yeah, I'm really sort of disappointed that we don't know more about these characters by this point in the show. I wish we had spent more time with our bad guys to get to understand them. Because again, they're bad guys. They're described as mercenaries, but there's something about them. They have their own sort of set of goals here, and I want to know more about them and what led them to this path in their lives. And yeah, it really bums me out that they haven't been more fleshed out as characters. Maybe we get more of that. Maybe we'll get hints of that next week. Again, Shin obviously going back to the galaxy for that main conflict, while Baylan appears prepared to stay behind on Peridia and search out that power that he's looking for. Now, is that ultimately what seals his fate? Does his unleashing this ancient primordial force power, which could be Abeloth, could be something completely new and different, does that spell his demise by freeing it? To be determined. We'll see what happens next week. But regardless, if that is the end of Baylan's skull, I will be disappointed. I want to know more. Give me the backstory for this character. And it bums me out that I'll probably have to get it in a comic book or in a novel, which it's better than nothing. But gosh, it would have been really nice for the TV audience who's not going to read the comic book, who's not going to read the novel, to have gotten that information via the course of the show's narratives. So yeah, that again, maybe they course correct this and we get all the information we need on them next week on some hour-long finale that fills in a lot of the gaps that we have. But yeah, and we got another good lightsaber fight between Ahsoka and Baylan. It was very fun and enjoyable. Again, that they have that fight, Shin, the bandits, and then the arrival of Imperial forces against Ezra and Sabine. That's a great battle too. There's good conflict there. The Noti with their little slingshots is cute and funny, but it's ultimately useless. I like that Ezra wouldn't take back the lightsaber that he gave to Sabine, so he's just using his force pushes and pulls and things like that. Ezra's not as prolific with his force powers as I would have expected someone to be after being stranded for so long. You would imagine he just had all this time on his hands, and he could have practiced and gotten real good at stuff. He seems competent, but not masterful. And I think that sort of was a tad disappointing because when he said, no, you keep the lightsaber, I got this. I was waiting to see something really, really cool happen. I was waiting to see Ezra really show off some force skills here. But we didn't get that. He's competent. He's capable. Sabine mixing up the lightsaber with her Mandalorian heritage, obviously relying on Beskar to deflect blaster bolts, but still happy to use a blaster to put people down. Blaster, lightsaber. It's a fun combination. Sabine looks pretty awesome using those moves and doing all that stuff that way. But of course, they still get surrounded. The literal surrounding of the wagons, again, reminding us that Star Wars, at its core, is also a Western. So, sort of a funny little moment to see them kind of get rounded up like that. And then Ahsoka comes in to save the day after she's broken off from her battle with Baylan. Interesting stuff there. And I want to pull up a sound clip just for funsies. So let's cue that up right now.
Well, now, this is a surprise. Didn't expect to see you again.
Disappointed?
No. However, can't allow you to interfere.
I don't have time for this.
That I know.
So I wanted to play that clip because it's great to see this battle happen again because Ahsoka Tano has a very different mindset going into this battle against Baylan Skoll. And the nod to samurai battles in other movies from Kurosawa on is evident in this scene. Another great homage to the roots of Star Wars occurs in this opening sequence as they square off against each other. And again, Ahsoka's in this battle now, and her mindset is different than it was the first time around. So it's a more even-keeled battle. I wish we got to see more of it. There's so much happening at this point in the episode with the battle that Sabine and Ezra and Shin are having against each other, and then this, and then everything's going on with Thrawn observing and dispatching Imperial forces. There's just a ton happening, so I would have loved to see more of this battle. But again, what is nice about it is that when you compare it to the first time they squared off against each other on Cephas, Ahsoka has a very different mentality now, and so her approach to battling Baylan is also very different, and I think makes her more of a balanced, effective warrior, and it's really, really neat. So ultimately, she does break off from battling Baylan because they do seem to be at a bit of a standstill. With the help of some air support from Huang, she's able to disengage and ride off to save Sabine and Ezra from the arriving Imperial forces. And this is where Thrawn reminds us that they didn't need to win this battle. This was all about the buying of time to allow them to do what they needed to get done. And let's just go ahead and play that clip so that Thrawn can remind us how much better he is than the rest of us.
What a rare sight. Almost like the Jedi of old. Recall the gunships. Call off the aerial pursuit. These are unfortunate, but acceptable losses given the absence of Lord Baylan. In the grand scheme of things, one might even call this first match with Tano a success.
I see only our enemies reunited.
Let me show you what I see. With our enemy distracted, the cargo transfer is now almost complete, which means we shall soon leave this forsaken place. Ahsoka Tano has lost the one thing she could not afford to lose today. Time. Time is very much on our side now, and I shall keep it that way.
So it's not the final moment of the episode, but it's pretty darn close. But we get the reunion that we've all wanted to see. Sabine, Ezra, Ahsoka, all three friends reunited here on the planet. And, I don't know what their move is. I'm very curious how everyone's going to make it back to the main Star Wars galaxy. Or do our heroes end up stranded on Peridea and have to figure out a way home via, we could talk about Stargates in Star Wars. They have existed. I think they're called hypergates in Star Wars. That could be a thing. If Thrawn departs and our heroes aren't on board, stowed away on their ship, we could have to explore Peridea and find some hypergates of old. Again, reincorporate some old legends, some old lore from the EU. If you wanted to go that route, you could. But yeah, I want to know what the play is here. I just want to know. I mean, again, obviously there's going to be a big battle coming, but we're talking about 3 versus the Empire and the Night Sisters. Doesn't seem like good odds. But, maybe Ahsoka will have a trick or two up her sleeve. There's still a lot to be settled here. What is Baylan Skoll ultimately up to? Will we see him on the far side of the planet uncovering some ancient temple? Possibly. Again, there's a lot of Dathomiri history that we could reincorporate into canon as well if they wanted to go that route. There's a lot that they can pull from as far as like old EU stuff if they really wanted to get into it. It's to be determined at this point. We'll see what happens. Again, it's a great episode. I wish they had sort of ratcheted the tension a little bit more. Again, the stakes are just kind of what they have always been at this point. I don't really feel like they've moved the needle up or down and made things any less important or more important. I guess now we run the risk of our heroes being stranded on this planet while Thrawn and everyone else rockets back to the main Star Wars galaxy to ignite a new galactic civil war. And I guess that's what we're here for, right? So next week is going to be a huge week as we get the chance to see how this all shakes out and we will have those massive discussions. And hopefully after next week, we will have an ultimate wrap-up episode. We'll have a friend come on to join us and get to have a real conversation about everything that has happened in this series. Because, my concerns about the pacing and some of the choices they made with Ahsoka in the early parts of the season aside, what they're doing is they're really, this whole season in particular is setting the table for a lot of Star Wars to come. Like the next phase of this New Republic era is hinging on what happens next in this final episode for season 1 of Ahsoka. So I'm very excited. I'm very intrigued by all of it, and I can't wait to see what happens next. This episode gets 8.5 buckets. Despite my concerns and my criticisms of it not ratcheting up dramatic tension enough, it's still a great episode. It's fun. It hits all the main Star Wars notes. It's another reminder that Dave Filoni is probably the most, the Star Wars creator most aligned with George Lucas's vision of Star Wars and sort of his feel for the action comedy balance, and paying respects to the films that inspired Lucas, the genres that inspired Lucas, westerns and samurai movies and all those different things, World War II movies. So another reminder that Filoni is probably the most aligned with Lucas's vision. None of us really need that reminder. We all know that intrinsically as longtime Star Wars fans. But if you want to point that out to new audience members, that might be a selling point. Well, this is the closest you're going to get to George Lucas ever doing Star Wars again. Maybe that sells them on it. Maybe it doesn't. We'll see. You have to let me know how that shakes out. But yeah, 8.5 buckets. I got some concerns. I'm really worried we're not going to get the backstories for Shin and Baylan before the end of the season. And the passing of Ray Stevens makes me very concerned that next week might be the last time we see Baylan Skoll on screen. We'll see. We'll talk about that some more as it happens. I got nothing else for you guys. Great episode today. I'm going to rewatch it later today. I'm excited because, again, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of action, a lot of fun stuff in here. So I definitely encourage all of you to rewatch it again as well. There's a lot happening. There's a lot to enjoy visually. This episode is Star Wars visual spectacle at its best. So take advantage of that and check it out again and get ready for what I hope will be an insanely awesome season finale next week. And with that being said, this is the Mandovision Podcast. I am your host, Nargai Tom, and I thank you so much for checking out our small independent Star Wars podcast here. We're so glad that you're here. People who take the time to listen to Mandovision are instantly members of Buckethead Nation, and we truly appreciate you being here, and we hope you stick around forever and ever and ever. The best way to reach out to us is on social media. We are at Mando_Vision on Twitter and Instagram. Please email the show at mandovisiontom@gmail.com. If you want to hit me up with your long-form thoughts, opinions, and ideas, love to hear them. Make sure you're liking, subscribing, following, and sharing this podcast with all the Mandalorians in your covert. And if you're inclined and your favorite podcasting platform allows it, sweet 5-star reviews. They help the independent podcasts like us stand out and not get lost in the space between galaxies, lost for all time. So truly appreciate that. Buckethead Nation continue to be excellent Star Wars fans to new and old fans alike. We're the best. You're the best. I don't want to let myself into that. I'm not the best. I'm okay. You're the best. So we'll be back next week to wrap up this season, but maybe not wrap up our talk about Ahsoka, because I'd love to have a friend on soon. Wink, wink. All right, Bucketheads. This podcast can only end one way. This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way. You expect me to search the galaxy for the home of this creature and deliver it to a race of enemy sorcerers?
This is the way.